here's where we have been so far in advanced classes. We've reviewed, I think, a little bit about classes. This is just some of our scrap notes about things like constructors and encapsulation and inheritance. And we also added a couple new things. This unit's all about lots of little new things getting added to classes. So for example, one of the things we added is that all classes derive from or are inheriting from which class? Which class do all classes inherit from?
Object.
The object class, right. And built into the object class are several methods, 3 of which we should kind of always override. What are those 3 methods? Pick one. Clone is 1. ToString is 2. What's the third one? Waiting, waiting. I think 2 of the 4 horsemen aren't paying attention, but
Horseman.
what is the third method?
Oh, my hand's going up.
Peter.
Okay, it's wait, I have here. Just a moment. Let me do my teaching.
Equals. Okay. So those are the 3 methods. So today we're going to make some modifications to our code. Okay? Starting at the person level. So here's what I want you to do. I want you to go to your person class. And right now we have 3 properties, name, age, and isMale. One is public, one is protected, and the other is protected as well. But we're going to change name back to being private. I want you to make name private. That's how it started, and then we modified it and made it protected. Okay? That causes no problems in the person class, but now when we go to the student class, okay, we have a problem right here. Super.name equals name is now not allowed because it is a private property. On our testing class, we didn't access the name, so our testing class is still okay. Now, here we're going to change this by writing in some methods that you have probably seen back when you were working in graphics in grade 11. 2 methods that you see very commonly in Java are methods that use the word set and the word get in their name. These are sometimes called setters and getters. Okay? So these setters and getters are very common, okay? But what I'd like you guys to know is that these aren't necessarily a programming standard, is to use the word set and get. For example, in C#, you didn't do that. You would say things like, this object dot text equals. You didn't say dot set text. You would actually just change it that way. But the proper terminology for these things called setters and getters are accessors, where you are accessing information or getting information. And here's the even cooler word, mutators, where you are mutating the data. You are changing the data. So those are the words that I want you to sort of try to use, accessors and mutators, to try and imply that we are setting and getting data. So let's do this. Let's go to our person class and add a accessor and a mutator. They're going to be very small methods, 1 line. So they'll be public, void, set, string name. Okay, so this is in the person class. And then we'll just say this dot name equals name. Because within the class, we can do that. And that's also a reminder as well that what I'm doing here is I'm taking this parameter, which is right here, and applying it to that property, which is up top there. Okay? That's what the word this means. The word this is implying that it's changing the actual class, the instance of the class. Okay, so since this is a new concept, let's comment this method. I know it's just an example, but this should probably go in our example. That set is a, okay, setting is a mutator method. Because you are mutating a property here. You are changing the name property with the set method. Okay, under the set method, we're going to make a public. It's not void, it returns a string called get. It needs no parameters. And all it does is returns the name. And this is a accessor method. Okay, so this is now set and get based on the name. Normally, accessor mutator methods aren't just written as set. They usually are a little more descriptive. They're usually something like set name, get name. But we're just doing this for our example, okay? Now, why would I write these methods instead of just making name public? Peter?
It means that you have to go through a certain portal.
Yeah, you have to, that's correct. You have to go through the method, which means you could theoretically build error checking into this. You could ensure that the name has a certain format to it. You could ensure that they're not passing you a blank name. By using accessor mutator methods, you are creating the interface for the programmers who use your class to use it properly. So now, how do we fix student?
Student.setName.
Not student.net set name, super.set name, or super.set actually. Super.set bracket name. We now change this to call the mutator method, whoops, inside of the student class. So now, as you can see, that's no problem because the set method is public. We are going through the mutator method to change the name. Okay. This is also in the notes. You can find it in the notes where I also have the example right in there. In the notes, I do say set and get name. Okay. That's better? Okay. Okay, next up. It's time to make another class.
Teacher class.
Yeah, you know where it's going. Okay. Just one sec. Is there any other? Yeah, we got our equals, toString. Okay. So now we're going to add to our advanced classes project another new Java class. And this class is going to be a teacher class. So capital T, teacher. Now, what you should see is because we edited our NetBeans templates, you'll notice the constructor has gone in there, as is the toString equals and clone method, have all got popped in to that teacher class. Okay? Okay, so let's pause for a second and take a look at this. This is a vocabulary list so far in this unit. This is our old class vocabulary, which hopefully you're at least somewhat familiar with, although we certainly reviewed properties, method, object, constructor, instantiate, private, public, inheritance, ISA, encapsulation, and then there's one that I mentioned in grade 11 called polymorphism, which I've put a red X on because I don't feel I did a good enough job explaining it in grade 11. So we are absolutely going to look at this in this unit as well. Now, on our new vocabulary list, protected, object, toString equals clone, and now I could check off accessor mutator. We've talked about that. What you also want to see is what's coming up here. So what's coming up in this unit is I'm going to be talking about static, memory, that's just a general discussion on memory. As you can see here is that connection to polymorphism. So that's where I'm going to re-explain it in this unit. And then three really big concepts: abstractions, interfaces, and generics. That's what's coming up. Okay, let's start with our teacher class. Okay? Now, first thing about a teacher is teacher extends, whoops, person. A teacher is a person. So by doing that, it picks up all the properties and methods of the person class. I know some of you were giggling there thinking, no, they're not. They're not people. Teachers are some other form of life. But yes, we are people. In my case, a frustrated person whose cars didn't start this morning and had to take the bus to school. Like a peon. All right. Now, let's think properties. The properties of the teacher. Well, a teacher has students. So what we're going to give it is a student array called students. So here what I'm doing is I have another class. Now, is this inheritance? What we have here is inheritance. This is the is-a relationship. Inheritance. This is the other type of communication between classes. This is not inheritance. What I have right here is another class. This is the has-a relationship, or the association. Oops, those are supposed to be S's. In other words, a teacher associates with students. Okay? So teacher has a students. That is not totally proper grammar. It's kind of like where the cat has a cheeseburger. But it hopefully is showing you those relationships. Okay, we're going to add a couple more properties. Since we're dealing with arrays right here, and right now the array has no size, we're going to add a couple little private properties. Not public, encapsulated. One of them is a count, to keep track of how many students we have. So we're going to keep a little integer that'll keep a count going. Okay? Second one is another little private but final integer. With arrays, we can't have an infinite size. Arrays have to have a maximum size. So we are going to set a maximum number of students. Okay? So these are our three properties. An array of students that we've made public, a count of those students, which we're going to keep private, and a maximum number of students, which we're also going to keep private. Or in other words, encapsulated. Now, we have a constructor to write. We will set those numbers within the constructor. Now, what I'm going to suggest is we're not going to keep it default. We are going to give it a parameter. Teachers have a name, so we're going to give it a name. Okay, so now that I've passed name to teacher, how do I set the name? Can any of you think of what the line of code will be? Hang on, Peter. Anyone else? This is showing that you understood what I just taught, if you think about it. Because a teacher is a person, how do I, so what was it? That's right, super.set name. Let's do it. Super.set name. We'll set the name of the teacher into the person class using this public mutator method. Notice me using the terminology again. I'm using a public mutator method to change the name of the superclass. Okay. I should probably also construct, like run all the stuff that the superclass does. So I should set the age and the is male, all that stuff as well in the superclass. So why don't I do that? And I'm going to do that first by just making a call out to superconstructor. Okay? So that sets the name, the age, and the gender, and then I override the name. Well, I don't actually override it, but I mutate it with the mutator method. Now let's set the age. Super.age. Can we do that? Yes, age is public. So I can change the age. We don't know how old this teacher is, but we shouldn't leave them 0. I'm actually going to ask you guys, what do you think the minimum teaching age should be? You guys have a variety of teachers in this building of different ages. 26? There are teachers younger than that in this building, I'll let you know. But we'll go with Dryden's suggestion, and we'll make the minimum teaching age 26. Do you know what age I started teaching at? 30 is correct. I was 30 my first year, okay? You guys wouldn't have wanted me up here in front of you when I was in my 20s. It would not have been a good idea. All right, now, I was going to say we could set the gender, but that's probably sexist. We shouldn't do that. But let's set the max students. Here's another question for you. How many students do you think an average teacher in this building teaches? 22? If I was an elementary school teacher, I'd say that's probably an accurate number. Because if you think back to elementary school, you had one teacher who would teach one group of students all day. Starting in middle school, you realize that teachers would teach other classes other than yours. Not so in elementary, unless maybe you were a phys ed teacher. But when you think of me, I teach certainly you guys all period 2, but I had a different group of students in here period 1, and then I'll have a different group of students in here in different periods in the day. And I would say out of the teachers in this building, I have a smaller average number of students than most. If I taught, say, grade 11 applied math or essentials math all day long, over 2 semesters, I've done the math, and the average number of students that a teacher in this building has in a year is about 120. So I want you guys to keep that in mind. When you think how many teachers you have in one school year, maximum would be about 10 to 12. Teachers have about 100 to 120 different students in a year. And I got to remember all your names? Oh, man, it's brutal. So let's set our max at 100. So we will give each teacher the maximum of 100 students that they can have. Let's set our count to 0. We have currently no students. But we have one other thing to do. Because we're dealing with an array here, we have to size our array. So students equals new student, and the size will be max students. What happened there? Oops. Okay. Remember, that's just a review of arrays. That with arrays, you have to set the size when you use the array. You can't just use them without setting the size. So our constructor takes care of all of that. Constructor constructs a person, sets the name, sets the age, sets the maximum students, sets the count to 0, and builds up the array ready to go for all these students. All right. What methods should a teacher have other than the 3 methods that we know we're going to override? Teach. Sure, a teacher should teach. Who am I going to teach right now? I have no students. So let's add a method to add a student. So let's start with that. Public, void, add student. It needs a parameter. The parameter is a student. Student, student. This is the student I'm going to add. Okay? This is not that tricky code, but it's a bit of a review of arrays. If I'm going to add a student to my array, then here's what I need to do. I say go into the array called students. Again, a reminder that with arrays you tend to use a plural word because it implies that there's more than one. I need to access a specific index in the student. Well, the index I'm going to access is count. And I'm going to set it to be that student, not students. So what I'm saying is, take this parameter called student and insert it into the array at spot 0, which makes sense because the array right now has 100 spots. They're all empty, so I can just use spot 0. But what's going to happen the next time I call this method is it will replace it with another student. So I should do one other thing. Count needs to go up by 1, right? No, because it would, yeah, yeah, it would. But I wouldn't recommend that, okay? You could also put count, count, or plus, plus, count.
But that's
yeah, that would pre-do it, yeah. Anyways, we're going to do it this way. But then here's a problem potentially down the line. This will work, and we'll keep adding students until we reach the max. Once we reach the maximum, we will run out of bounds on that array. So we're going to throw a little error check in. If count is greater than the max, in other words, if it goes past the maximum, well, we could do several things. We could just put up a message box saying you can't add any more students. But here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to set the count back to 0. Because I'm just going to say, you know what, if I get a 101st student, then they're going to just take the spot of my first student. So you get kicked out. So when I reach my maximum, the first student who joined is now kicked out because this new student gets in. This is going to be our add student method. It will be used to add students to the teacher. Okay, everybody got that? Let's now take a second to override our toString method. Right now, it'll just return superdot to string, which is not going to be useful to us. So instead, let's change what our toString method does. Okay? So when we output a teacher, we want to do it this way. We're going to say string text equals superdot to string. So first of all, we'll get all the information from the superclass. So if we think about that, it'll go to the person to string method, right? And in the person to string method, what did we write? What did we write in that? Oh, we don't have a toString method in person. So let's add a toString method to our person class. So let's go back to teacher. I'd actually recommend you copy the toString method over to person. We're going to go a little bit quicker here. Paste in the toString method. And let's think about how we can return a person to string. Let's just go return name plus a comma plus the age plus a comma plus the is male. There, we'll keep it simple. So when you ask for a person as a string, it'll just be name, comma, age, comma, is male. So that'll be the way we represent a person. Okay? Now, when I get back to teacher, it starts off with that. Okay, so the text starts off with that piece of data. Okay? But maybe we should actually add the word teacher to the front of that. So I'm going to do that. I'm going to say teacher. Right? It's like a title. So I'm going to say teacher Dave instead of just Dave. So I'm going to add my title to the front of that so that it'll be implying that it's a teacher. At the end of this method, we're going to return that text. Return the text. However, in the middle, let's add more data to this. What other pieces of data can we add to the teacher other than just that we're calling them a teacher? We can add all the student information. That's correct. So why don't we do that? Why don't we say a for loop running up to students dot length, which again is a reminder how you can loop through arrays. Okay, so we're going to loop through every spot in the array of students because we'll go right up to its length. Well, we're going to get to that. Okay, and we're going to put an if statement in. If students spot I is not equal to a null value, that means there's an active student there. With arrays of classes, if the spot isn't full, in there sits a null. So if it's not a null, then the text equals the text plus, or plus equals, quote, or how about we just say students, bracket I, dot to string. So we'll turn the student into a string on that spot. And then we'll add a new line. Or actually, maybe we'll add the new line first. So a new line character plus that. So we'll put a new line character, and then we'll put what the student to string is. Oh, wait a minute. We don't have a toString method in our student class. So we're going to have to deal with that next. But I want to give you a second to get that coded in. So we loop through every single spot in the array except the nulls and output a new line and then what the student data is. Okay? And actually, I think I'm going to add a little bit more to that. I'm going to add a new line, and then I'm going to add the variable I, so it'll keep a counter going with it. I plus a colon space plus. Okay? So it'll be like 0, 1. So that way we'll actually see the count as well as we go through the students. Okay, let's jump over to the student class. We should add a toString method to it. Now, if you guys are like me, we had a toString method there. And it was working fine. It was just returning super.toString, which was the person thing. But let's add a little to that. Let's add in the front of this the word student. Let's give you guys a title as well. Lowercase s, though. Student. Okay? So it's now doing the person to string, but it's now adding this little piece of information to it when it turns a student into a string. Okay? I'm not going to capitalize S. I'm going to leave you guys as lowercase. All right, we only have time to test this before the 42S take over. So we've now got this. Let's go to our advanced classes test, and let's build a teacher. Teacher, teacher equals new teacher. We have to pass it a name. Teachy McTeacherson will be the name. Yeah, pretty much. Your destiny is decided. Teacher dot add student. We can add the student. We have a student McStudentson. And then we will output, S out, our teacher. Because when you output teacher, it'll turn it into a string using the toString method. So, let's see what happens. And here's what we get. Teacher, Teachy McTeacherson, 26, is not a male. Teachy McTeacherson, that's a tough name for a woman to have. Student 0 is Studenty McStudentson, who's 16 and is a male. So as you can see, we're starting to get the teacher class working with the code we've provided.